It was a crisp autumn evening when I walked into our home earlier than expected. The air carried the faint scent of burning leaves, a reminder of the season slipping into winter. The front door creaked open, and I dropped my keys into the bowl by the entrance, ready to unwind after a long day at work. But the tranquility I expected was shattered the moment I stepped into the living room. There, framed by the soft glow of the lamp beside our worn-out couch, I saw them. Susan, my wife of 40 years, entangled with another man. Mark, a mutual friend. The shock hit me like a physical blow, stealing my breath and locking my limbs in place. Susan's gasp broke the silence, her eyes wide with guilt and fear as she scrambled to cover herself with a blanket. Mark, disheveled and flushed, stood frozen beside her, his gaze a mix of shame and defiance. Time seemed to stretch as I stood there, trying to comprehend the scene before me. Images flashed through my mind, the decades we'd spent together, raising children, weathering storms, and celebrating joys. But now, those memories felt distant, replaced by the raw sting of betrayal. "Rick," Susan's voice wavered, attempting to form words of explanation, of apology perhaps. But they hung hollow in the air, drowned out by the rush of blood in my ears. I swallowed hard, my voice hoarse as I finally spoke, each word heavy with disbelief and hurt. "What is this, Susan?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again, tears welling in her eyes. Mark shifted uncomfortably, a guilty shadow in the corner of the room. "Rick, Susan began, her voice trembling. I held up a hand, cutting her off. The room felt colder now, the warmth of our shared life drained away in an instant. I turned on my heel and walked out, leaving Susan's desperate apologies and Mark's silent shame behind me. Outside, the autumn wind whipped at my face, mirroring the turmoil inside me. Anger, sadness, betrayal, all swirled together in a maelstrom of emotions I couldn't yet untangle. But one thing was clear. My world had just shattered, and there was no going back. The drive was a blur, the road slipping away beneath the wheels of my car as I navigated through the familiar streets of our neighborhood. Thoughts raced through my mind, each one a dagger of pain and confusion. Arriving home, the silence of the house greeted me like an old friend turned stranger. The walls seemed to close in, suffocating me with memories of happier times, family dinners, holidays, quiet evenings spent reading side by side. But now, everything felt tainted. The living room where I had confronted Susan and Mark was a battlefield of emotions, remnants of their presence lingering in the air. I avoided looking at the couch where they had been entwined, the very sight filling me with a mix of revulsion and heartbreak. I paced the length of the room, my mind replaying the scene over and over. Susan's tear-streaked face, Mark's guilty eyes, they haunted me like ghosts of the life I thought we had built together. How long had this betrayal been going on? How could Susan do this to us, to our family? The unanswered questions gnawed at me, each one a knot tightening in my chest. I reached for the framed photo on the mantel, a snapshot of us on our anniversary last year, smiles wide and hearts full. Now it felt like a cruel mockery of what once was. Time passed in a haze, the hours blending into a numb fog of disbelief. I heard Susan's footsteps as she cautiously entered the room, her presence a stark reminder of the shattered trust between us. "Rick." Her voice was barely a whisper, filled with a pleading I couldn't bring myself to answer. I turned to face her, my expression a mask of pain and anger. "How long, Susan?" The words came out harsher than I intended, laced with the betrayal that tore through me. She flinched, tears welling in her eyes once more. "I'm so sorry," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "It was a mistake. I didn't mean—" Her excuses hung in the air, suffocating any hope of reconciliation. I shook my head, unable to find words to respond. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken accusations and shattered dreams. "I don't know if I can forgive this," I finally managed to say, the weight of the truth settling heavily on my shoulders. Susan's face crumpled, a mixture of anguish and regret contorting her features. "Please, Rick," she begged, reaching out as if to touch me, but I stepped back, the distance between us now an unbridgeable chasm. "I need time," I said quietly, my voice raw with emotion. "I need to figure things out." She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I understand," she whispered, her voice choked with sorrow. With that, I turned away, retreating to the sanctuary of our bedroom. Alone with my thoughts, I stared out the window at the darkening sky, grappling with the shattered pieces of my life scattered at my feet. Days passed in a tense silence, each moment weighed down by the weight of betrayal and uncertainty. Susan and I moved through the motions of daily life, but the air between us crackled with unspoken words and unresolved tension. Finally, unable to bear the weight of it any longer, I called for a meeting in the living room one evening. The atmosphere was heavy with anticipation as Susan sat opposite me, her eyes avoiding mine. "Rick," she began, her voice trembling with nerves. I held up a hand, cutting off her attempt to placate me with words I couldn't yet hear. "I need to understand," I said, my tone calm but firm. "How did this happen? How long has it been going on?" Susan flinched, her gaze dropping to her hands in her lap. It's been going on for a few months," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "I didn't mean for it to happen. It just happened." My jaw clenched at her words, the pain of her betrayal surfacing once more. "With Mark," I stated, the name bitter on my tongue. She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, Rick. I never meant to hurt you." The apology hung in the air, hollow and insufficient against the enormity of what she had done. Anger flared within me, threatening to consume the last shreds of my composure. "How could you?" I demanded, my voice rising despite my efforts to remain calm. "After all these years, after everything we've been through." Susan's tears fell freely now, her face a mask of regret and shame. "I don't know," she sobbed, her words choked with emotion. "I was lonely, neglected. I thought—" Her excuses grated against my wounded pride, fueling the fire of betrayal that raged within me. "That's not an excuse," I said sharply, my voice cutting through her tears. "You made a choice, Susan. You chose to betray me." She recoiled at my words, the truth of them striking home. "I know," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "and I hate myself for it." The admission softened my anger slightly, replaced now by a deep ache of disappointment and sorrow. "Do you love him?" I asked quietly, the question hanging between us like a fragile thread. Susan hesitated, her gaze flickering uncertainly. I don't know," she admitted finally, her voice wavering. "Maybe. I don't know anymore." The admission stung, a sharp reminder of how far apart we had drifted. Silence settled between us once more, heavy with the weight of shattered trust and unanswered questions. "I don't know if I can forgive this," I said at last, the words heavy with resignation. The truth hung between us, a barrier that seemed insurmountable. Susan's shoulders slumped in defeat, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I understand," she whispered brokenly, her voice filled with remorse. And with that, the conversation ended, leaving us both adrift in a sea of uncertainty and heartache. After the tumultuous confrontation, a heavy silence settled over our home. Susan retreated to the spare bedroom, giving me the space I needed to sort through my thoughts and emotions. For days, I wrestled with the decision that loomed before me like a daunting mountain. Could our marriage survive this betrayal? Did I still love Susan enough to forgive her? The questions swirled in my mind, each one a sharp reminder of the shattered trust that now lay between us. In the solitude of my thoughts, clarity began to emerge. I couldn't continue living in a marriage tainted by infidelity. The foundation of trust we had painstakingly built over 4 decades had crumbled irreparably. With resolve hardening within me, I reached out to a trusted lawyer. Sitting across from him in his office, I outlined the situation with a voice that was steady, despite the turmoil inside. "I need to protect my assets," I explained, detailing Susan's infidelity and my intention to file for divorce. The lawyer listened attentively, nodding occasionally as I laid out my plan. "Given the circumstances, we'll need to gather evidence of her affair," he advised, his tone matter of fact. "It will strengthen your case in court, especially regarding asset division and alimony." I nodded, feeling a sense of relief mingled with sadness. The reality of our marriage ending settled heavily on my shoulders, but I knew this was the only path forward. Susan's betrayal had forced my hand, leaving me no choice but to protect myself and our shared assets. Leaving the lawyer's office, I began to take practical steps. I discreetly gathered evidence of Susan's affair, photographs, text messages, and witness statements from friends who had seen them together. Each piece of evidence felt like another blow to my heart, a painful reminder of the life we had once shared. At home, Susan watched me with wary eyes, sensing the finality in my actions. She attempted to reach out, to apologize once more, but I remained resolute. The decision had been made, and I couldn't afford to waver now. Days turned into weeks as I meticulously prepared for the legal battle ahead. I consulted financial advisors, ensuring that every asset was protected from Susan's potential attempts to drain our joint accounts. The process was a blur of paperwork and meetings, each step bringing me closer to the inevitable end of our marriage. But amidst the practicalities, a part of me mourned for the dreams we had once shared, for the future that had been shattered by Susan's betrayal. Yet, with each document signed and each piece of evidence gathered, a quiet sense of empowerment began to grow within me. I was taking control of my own destiny, refusing to let Susan's actions define my future. As the days passed, I steeled myself for the challenges ahead. Divorce proceedings loomed on the horizon, a legal battlefield where emotions and finances would collide. But I was prepared, armed with the knowledge that I had made the right decision for myself and my future. Susan's attempts at reconciliation grew more desperate, her apologies tinged with regret and sorrow. But I remained steadfast. My heart hardened against the pain of her betrayal. The decision had been made. Now I had to see it through. With my decision to proceed with divorce firm in my mind, I focused on gathering irrefutable evidence of Susan's affair. It was a task that required discretion and meticulousness. Every piece of evidence, a brick in the foundation of my case. I started with what I knew. The times and places where Susan and Mark had been seen together. Friends who had unwittingly crossed paths with them provided statements, recounting details of their interactions that painted a damning picture. Armed with this initial information, I began to dig deeper. I discreetly hired a private investigator recommended by my lawyer, someone skilled in uncovering the truth hidden beneath layers of deception. The investigator's findings were both painful and enlightening. Photographs captured Susan and Mark together, a casual lunch here, a secretive meeting there. Each image felt like a dagger through my heart, proof of the intimacy that had blossomed behind my back. Text messages retrieved from Susan's phone further corroborated their affair. Innocuous at first glance, the messages revealed a depth of connection and familiarity that went beyond friendship. Words exchanged late at night, promises made in hushed tones, each message a betrayal in itself. I kept the evidence meticulously organized, documenting each piece with dates, times, and locations. The weight of it all pressed down on me, a reminder of the life-altering decision I had been forced to make. Throughout this process, Susan watched me with a mixture of apprehension and guilt. Her attempts at reconciliation grew more desperate, her apologies more fervent, but each apology fell flat against the weight of the evidence I had amassed. "You don't have to do this," she pleaded one evening, her voice breaking with emotion. "We can work through this. I'll end it with Mark. Please, Rick." Her words stirred a tumult of emotions within me, anger, sorrow, and a lingering sense of disbelief. "It's too late for that, Susan," I replied, my voice colder than I intended. "This is the consequence of your choices." Her face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I never meant to hurt you," she sobbed, her words a desperate plea for forgiveness. But forgiveness felt like an elusive dream, a distant shore beyond the stormy seas of betrayal. I couldn't trust her anymore, couldn't look at her without seeing the shadows of her infidelity lurking behind her eyes. Days turned into weeks as I prepared for the legal battle ahead. The evidence I had gathered became the cornerstone of my case, proof of Susan's breach of trust and fidelity. I consulted with my lawyer regularly, strategizing our approach to ensure that every detail was covered. The process was grueling, each step a reminder of the life I had once known and the future that now lay uncertain before me. But through it all, a quiet sense of determination fueled my resolve. I was taking back control of my life, refusing to let Susan's betrayal define my future. As the divorce proceedings loomed closer, I steeled myself for the challenges ahead. The courtroom would become the arena where justice and closure awaited, where the truth would be laid bare for all to see. But amidst the legal preparations and emotional turmoil, a part of me mourned for the life I had lost, the dreams of growing old together, of shared memories and unspoken promises. They had been shattered by Susan's betrayal, leaving behind a void that seemed impossible to fill. Yet, as I reviewed the evidence one final time, a quiet sense of satisfaction began to settle within me. I had fought to protect my integrity, my assets, and my future. And no matter the outcome, I knew that I had made the right decision for myself. The decision to divorce Susan weighed heavily on my mind as I sought legal advice from a trusted attorney. I scheduled a meeting with Mr. Davis, a seasoned lawyer recommended by a colleague who had gone through a similar ordeal. Mr. Davis's office was a quiet sanctuary amidst the chaos of my thoughts. The walls lined with law books seemed to whisper of justice and resolution, offering a sense of clarity I desperately needed. We sat across from each other, Mr. Davis's demeanor calm and attentive as I recounted the painful details of Susan's affair and my decision to end our marriage. "I'm sorry you're going through this, Rick," Mr. Davis said sincerely, his voice a reassuring anchor in the storm of emotions. "Infidelity cases are always challenging, but we'll approach this strategically." I nodded, grateful for his steady presence. "I need to protect my assets," I explained, outlining my concerns about Susan potentially draining our joint accounts, "and I want to ensure a fair division of property." Mr. Davis listened intently, his brow furrowing slightly as he considered the complexities of my situation. "Given the evidence you've gathered, we have a strong case for adultery," he remarked, his tone professional yet empathetic. "We'll need to proceed with caution, especially regarding the emotional toll it might take." His words resonated with me, a reminder of the delicate balance between legal strategy and personal upheaval. The divorce process would not only determine the division of assets, but also unravel the fabric of a life built over 4 decades. "We'll file for divorce on grounds of adultery," Mr. Davis continued, his voice steady. "I'll draft the petition and ensure that all necessary documents are in order." I nodded again, a sense of relief mingling with the sadness that weighed on my heart. "What about alimony?" I asked, knowing that financial considerations would play a crucial role in our divorce settlement. Mr. Davis leaned forward, his gaze focused. "Given the circumstances, we'll argue for minimal or no alimony," he explained, outlining his strategy to protect my financial interests. "Susan's actions have significantly impacted your marriage, and we'll make sure the court understands that." I appreciated his thoroughness and clarity, feeling a sense of reassurance in his expertise. The legal proceedings ahead would be daunting, but with Mr. Davis's guidance, I knew I was in capable hands. As our meeting drew to a close, Mr. Davis handed me a stack of documents to review and sign. "Take your time going through these," he advised, his tone gentle, "and don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or concerns." I thanked him gratefully, the weight of his words settling over me like a mantle of responsibility. The path ahead was uncertain, but with Mr. Davis's guidance, I felt a glimmer of hope amidst the turmoil. Leaving Mr. Davis's office, I carried with me a renewed sense of purpose. The legal battle ahead would be arduous, but it was a necessary step toward reclaiming my life and my future from the wreckage of Susan's betrayal. As I drove home, thoughts of the coming divorce proceedings swirled in my mind. The courtroom would soon become the battleground, where justice and closure awaited, where the truth of Susan's infidelity would be laid bare for all to see. But amidst the legal preparations and emotional turmoil, a part of me mourned for the life I had lost, the dreams of growing old together, of shared memories and unspoken promises. They had been shattered by Susan's betrayal, leaving behind a void that seemed impossible to fill. Yet as I reviewed the documents Mr. Davis had given me, a quiet sense of determination began to settle within me. I had taken the first steps toward reclaiming my integrity, my assets, and my future. And no matter the outcome, I knew that I had made the right decision for myself. The days following my decision to proceed with divorce were fraught with tension and uncertainty. Susan's attempts at reconciliation grew more desperate, her apologies more fervent. She pleaded with me to reconsider, to give our marriage another chance. One evening, as we sat across from each other in the dimly lit dining room, Susan broached the subject with a sense of urgency in her voice. Her eyes, red and swollen from crying, searched mine for any sign of relenting. "Rick, please," she began, her voice trembling with emotion. "I know I made a mistake. I'm sorry for what I've done, but we can work through this. We've been together for 40 years. Surely that's worth something." Her words struck a chord within me, stirring memories of the love and companionship we had once shared. But they were overshadowed by the painful reality of her betrayal. "I can't just forget what happened, Susan," I replied quietly, my voice tinged with sadness. You chose to betray our marriage. You made that choice." She flinched at my words, tears welling in her eyes once more. "I know," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper, "and I hate myself for it. But please, Rick, don't let this destroy us." Her plea tugged at my heart, the conflicting emotions within me warring for dominance. Part of me wanted to believe her, to embrace the possibility of forgiveness and reconciliation. But another part, the part that had been wounded by her betrayal, remained steadfast in its resolve. "I filed for divorce, Susan," I said finally, my tone gentle yet firm. "I've hired a lawyer, and the process is already underway." Her face paled, shock and disbelief flickering across her features. "You can't be serious," she whispered, her voice filled with desperation. "I am," I replied, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. "This is the consequence of your actions, Susan. I need to protect myself and our assets." She shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Please, Rick," she pleaded, reaching out as if to touch me. But I pulled away, the distance between us now an unbridgeable chasm. "It's too late for ultimatums, Susan," I said quietly, my words heavy with resignation. "I've made my decision." With that, I stood and left the room, leaving Susan sitting at the table, her hands trembling and her heart breaking. The silence that followed was deafening, each moment filled with the weight of our shattered dreams and uncertain future. Alone in our bedroom, I wrestled with the guilt and sadness that threatened to overwhelm me. Had I made the right decision? Was there still a chance for us to salvage what remained of our marriage? But deep down, I knew that trust once broken was not easily mended. Susan's betrayal had irreparably changed our relationship, casting a shadow over the love and commitment we had once shared. As the days passed, Susan's attempts at reconciliation grew more desperate. She wrote letters, left messages on my phone, and even enlisted the help of friends and family to plead her case. But amidst her efforts, a quiet resolve began to settle within me. I had chosen to prioritize my own well-being and integrity, refusing to allow Susan's betrayal to define my future. The divorce proceedings loomed on the horizon, a legal battle that would determine the division of our assets and the finality of our marriage. It was a path I had chosen with a heavy heart, but one that I knew was necessary for my own peace of mind. And as I prepared to face the challenges ahead, I clung to the hope that someday I would find healing and closure amidst the wreckage of Susan's betrayal. As the divorce proceedings progressed, the time came to confront the reality of Susan's infidelity publicly. It was a daunting step, one that would expose the depth of her betrayal to our friends, family, and the community we had been a part of for so many years. I gathered the evidence meticulously compiled with the help of my lawyer, a stack of photographs, text messages, and witness statements that painted a vivid picture of Susan's affair with Mark. Each piece of evidence carried the weight of truth, a testament to the breach of trust that had shattered our marriage. With Mr. Davis by my side, I arranged a meeting with Susan's family and close friends. The atmosphere in the room was tense as I presented the evidence, laying bare the extent of Susan's betrayal in stark detail. Faces contorted with shock and disbelief as they absorbed the truth. Susan's sister Anna gasped audibly, her hand flying to her mouth in horror. Tom, our longtime friend, shook his head in disbelief, unable to reconcile the image of Susan with the evidence before him. "I'm sorry you all have to see this," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging within me. "But you need to know the truth." Susan sat beside me, her face pale and stricken with shame. She attempted to speak, to offer some semblance of an explanation or apology, but her words fell flat against the weight of the evidence. "How could you?" Anna's voice trembled with anger and hurt, her eyes fixed accusingly on her sister. "I never thought—" Tom's voice trailed off, his disbelief palpable. Susan's attempts to salvage her reputation crumbled in the face of undeniable proof. The room filled with a heavy silence, broken only by the sound of stifled sobs and murmured apologies. "I'm so sorry," Susan finally managed to whisper, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I never meant to hurt any of you." Her words hung in the air, a hollow echo of the pain she had inflicted. I watched as our friends and family grappled with the revelation, their expressions a mix of sympathy and betrayal. Mr. Davis stepped forward, his voice calm and authoritative. "I understand this is difficult for everyone," he said, addressing Susan's family and friends with empathy. "But Rick has filed for divorce on grounds of adultery, and we're proceeding with the legal process. His words marked the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter defined by legal proceedings, emotional upheaval, and the unraveling of relationships once thought unbreakable. As our meeting drew to a close, I felt a sense of relief mingled with sorrow. The truth was out now, laid bare for all to see. There was no turning back, no undoing the damage that had been done. Leaving Susan's family and friends behind, I carried with me a mix of emotions: anger at Susan's betrayal, sadness for the shattered relationships, and a quiet determination to see the divorce through to its conclusion. The days that followed were filled with a flurry of legal activity. Court dates were set, documents were filed, and preparations were made for the legal battle that lay ahead. Each step brought me closer to the closure I sought, a resolution to the pain and turmoil that had engulfed my life since discovering Susan's affair. But amidst the legal proceedings and emotional turmoil, a part of me mourned for the life I had lost, the dreams of growing old together, of shared memories and unspoken promises. They had been shattered by Susan's betrayal, leaving behind a void that seemed impossible to fill. Yet, as I faced the challenges ahead, I clung to the hope that someday I would find healing and closure amidst the wreckage of Susan's betrayal. The revelation of Susan's infidelity sent shockwaves through our social circle and community. News travels fast in a small town, and soon whispers and rumors began to circulate about the impending divorce and the reasons behind it. I found myself at the center of attention, the subject of sympathetic glances and hushed conversations wherever I went. Friends and acquaintances approached me cautiously, offering words of support and encouragement, while carefully avoiding the topic of Susan's betrayal. "It's a shame what happened," Mrs. Johnson, our neighbor, said sympathetically as she handed me a casserole one evening. "You two seemed so happy together." I accepted her gesture with a tight smile, the weight of her words a reminder of the facade we had maintained for so long. "Thank you, Mrs. Johnson," I replied quietly, not trusting myself to say more. The grocery store became another battleground of public exposure. I noticed curious glances from familiar faces as I navigated the aisles, their eyes filled with unspoken questions about the dissolution of my marriage. "Rick, I heard about Susan." Mr. Thompson, a longtime friend, began tentatively one day, his voice trailing off as he struggled to find the right words. I nodded, my throat tightening with emotion. "It's been difficult," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Thompson clasped my shoulder in a gesture of solidarity. "If there's anything I can do," he offered sincerely. I appreciated the genuine concern of our friends and neighbors, but each sympathetic word and well-meaning gesture served as a painful reminder of the public exposure of Susan's betrayal. Social gatherings became another minefield of awkward conversations and uncomfortable silences. I attended events alone now, acutely aware of the absence of the woman who had once been my partner and confidant. "Rick, how are you holding up?" Mary, a mutual friend, asked with genuine concern at a neighborhood barbecue. "I'm taking it one day at a time," I replied with a forced smile, my gaze drifting to where Susan and I had once stood together, sharing laughter and conversation. Mary nodded understandingly, her eyes filled with sympathy. "If you ever need to talk." Her offer hung in the air, a lifeline amidst the storm of emotions swirling within me. I knew I needed support now more than ever, but the pain of Susan's betrayal made it difficult to accept. As the weeks passed, the initial shock of Susan's infidelity began to give way to a weary acceptance. Our once private pain had become a public spectacle, dissected and discussed by friends, acquaintances, and even strangers who had heard the rumors. Through it all, I clung to a sense of dignity and composure, refusing to allow Susan's betrayal to define my identity or reputation. The public exposure was a bitter pill to swallow, but I was determined to navigate this tumultuous chapter of my life with grace and resilience. Amidst the public scrutiny and whispered gossip, I found moments of solace in quiet reflection and solitary walks. The familiar streets of our town became a refuge, offering a sense of normalcy amidst the chaos of my personal life. But beneath the surface, a storm of emotions continued to rage. Anger at Susan's betrayal, sorrow for the shattered dreams, and a profound sense of loss for the life we had once shared. The public exposure of our private pain was a wound that cut deep, leaving scars that would take time to heal. As I prepared for the legal proceedings ahead, I knew that the road to closure would be long and challenging. The courtroom would soon become the final battleground where justice and resolution awaited, where the truth of Susan's infidelity would be examined and judged. But amidst the public exposure and personal turmoil, I held on to the hope that, someday, I would find healing and peace amidst the wreckage of Susan's betrayal. With the divorce proceedings looming and the public exposure of Susan's infidelity weighing heavily on my mind, I turned my attention to the intricate dance of financial maneuvering. It was a crucial aspect of the divorce process, one that would determine the division of our assets and financial stability moving forward. Armed with advice from my lawyer, Mr. Davis, I took proactive steps to protect my financial interests. We had meticulously prepared for this phase, gathering documentation of our assets, income sources, and liabilities. One of the first tasks was to freeze our joint accounts to prevent Susan from making unauthorized withdrawals. It was a necessary precaution given the uncertainty surrounding our financial future. "We'll need to review all joint accounts and investments," Mr. Davis advised during one of our meetings. "This will ensure that your assets are protected during the divorce proceedings." I nodded, grateful for his guidance in navigating the complexities of asset division. Together, we reviewed bank statements, investment portfolios, and retirement accounts, ensuring that everything was accounted for and properly valued. "Susan may try to contest certain assets," Mr. Davis warned, his tone grave. "We need to be prepared for any challenges she might present." His words underscored the adversarial nature of divorce proceedings, where financial negotiations could become contentious and emotionally charged. I braced myself for the challenges ahead, determined to secure a fair and equitable division of our marital assets. As the process unfolded, I consulted with financial advisors to explore options for restructuring our investments and retirement funds. It was a delicate balance, protecting my own financial security while ensuring that Susan received a fair share of our accumulated wealth. "Strategic planning is key," Mr. Davis reiterated during each meeting. "We want to minimize tax implications and maximize your financial stability post-divorce." I followed his advice diligently, making informed decisions about property settlements, alimony considerations, and the division of our savings. Each negotiation brought me closer to the resolution I sought, a clean break from Susan and a secure financial future. Amidst the financial maneuvering, I faced difficult decisions about our shared assets, the family home where we had raised our children, investments accumulated over decades of hard work, and sentimental possessions that held memories of happier times. "It's not just about the numbers," Mr. Davis reminded me during a particularly challenging meeting. "It's about finding a fair and equitable resolution that allows you both to move forward." His words resonated with me, a reminder of the emotional toll that divorce exacts on both parties. I struggled with guilt and sadness as I made decisions that would impact Susan's financial future, knowing that our shared dreams had been shattered by her betrayal. Yet, amidst the financial negotiations and emotional turmoil, a sense of clarity began to emerge. I was reclaiming control of my financial destiny, making decisions that prioritized my own well-being and future stability. As the divorce proceedings continued, I remained steadfast in my commitment to navigating this challenging chapter of my life with integrity and resilience. The courtroom would soon become the final battleground, where financial agreements would be formalized, marking the end of our shared financial entanglements. But amidst the complexities of asset division and financial maneuvering, I held on to the hope that someday I would find closure and peace amidst the wreckage of Susan's betrayal. As the divorce proceedings unfolded and the reality of our marriage's dissolution became increasingly imminent, Susan's desperation grew palpable. Her initial shock and sorrow had given way to a frantic attempt to salvage what remained of our life together. I received a barrage of messages and phone calls from Susan, apologies interspersed with pleas for reconciliation. Each voicemail and text message was a testament to her desperation, a last-ditch effort to undo the irreparable damage caused by her infidelity. "Rick, please. I can't bear the thought of losing you," Susan pleaded in one tearful voicemail, her voice breaking with emotion. "I'll do anything to make this right. Please give me another chance." Her words stirred conflicting emotions within me: anger at her betrayal, sorrow for the shattered dreams, and a lingering sense of disbelief that our marriage had unraveled so swiftly. But amidst Susan's desperate attempts at reconciliation, a part of me remained resolute in my decision. Trust, once broken, was not easily mended, and the foundation of our marriage had been irreversibly shattered by her affair with Mark. "I've filed for divorce, Susan," I reminded her firmly during a tense phone conversation. "This is the consequence of your actions." Her response was a choked sob, the weight of my words sinking in with painful clarity. "I know," she whispered brokenly, "but please, Rick, I love you. I made a mistake." The sincerity in her voice tugged at my heart, the memories of our life together warring with the betrayal that had torn us apart. But I held firm, unwilling to waver in my resolve. "I need to protect myself," I explained, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "And I can't continue living in a marriage tainted by infidelity." Silence stretched between us, heavy with the weight of unspoken words and unshed tears. The reality of our impending divorce hung over us like a dark cloud, casting a shadow over the love and companionship we had once shared. Days turned into weeks as Susan's desperation manifested in increasingly erratic behavior. She showed up unannounced at my workplace, pleading for a chance to talk. She sent flowers and gifts, each gesture a desperate attempt to win back my favor. "I can change, Rick," she insisted during one emotional confrontation outside my office. "I'll go to counseling. I'll do whatever it takes to earn your forgiveness." Her words struck a chord within me, stirring memories of the love and commitment we had once shared. But they were overshadowed by the pain of her betrayal and the irreparable damage it had inflicted on our marriage. "I can't just forget what happened, Susan," I replied wearily, my voice tinged with sadness. "Trust once broken." "I know," she interrupted, tears streaming down her face, "but I'll spend the rest of my life proving to you that I can change." Her desperation was palpable, a raw and painful reminder of the depth of her regret. But despite her promises and tearful pleas, I knew that forgiveness would not come easily, or perhaps ever. As the divorce proceedings continued, Susan's desperation reached new heights. She hired her own lawyer, contesting the division of assets and alimony considerations outlined in my initial filing. Legal battles ensued, each one a testament to the emotional and financial toll of our fractured marriage. Through it all, I remained steadfast in my decision to prioritize my own well-being and integrity. Susan's desperation had become a constant backdrop to the legal proceedings, a reminder of the painful reality of our shattered marriage. But amidst the chaos and turmoil, I held on to the hope that someday I would find healing and closure amidst the wreckage of Susan's betrayal. As Susan's desperation escalated and the divorce proceedings dragged on, a turning point emerged, a moment where the tables began to turn in unexpected ways. Throughout the legal battle, Susan had contested the division of assets and financial arrangements outlined in my initial filing. Her lawyer argued vehemently for a more favorable settlement, challenging the evidence of her infidelity and painting me as unreasonable and vindictive. But amidst the adversarial proceedings, a critical piece of evidence emerged, a discovery that would shift the balance of power in my favor. During a routine review of financial records with my lawyer, Mr. Davis, we uncovered discrepancies in Susan's personal accounts. Transactions flagged by our forensic accountant revealed sizable withdrawals and transfers to accounts linked to Mark, her former lover. "This changes everything," Mr. Davis remarked, his voice tinged with cautious optimism. "We'll need to investigate further, but it appears Susan has been hiding assets." The revelation sent shockwaves through the legal proceedings, casting doubt on Susan's credibility and motives. It was a pivotal moment, a turning point that exposed the depth of her deception and undermined her efforts to contest the terms of our divorce. Armed with this new evidence, Mr. Davis filed a motion to compel Susan to disclose all financial assets and transactions. The courtroom became the arena where truth and justice awaited, where the consequences of Susan's actions would be scrutinized and judged. "We have a strong case for financial misconduct," Mr. Davis explained during a strategy meeting. "Susan's attempts to conceal assets could impact the division of property and alimony considerations." I nodded, a sense of vindication mingling with the weariness of prolonged legal battles. The discovery of Susan's hidden assets was a validation of my decision to prioritize my own financial security amidst the turmoil of our divorce. As the legal proceedings continued, Susan's desperation grew more pronounced. Her attempts to salvage her reputation and financial interests faltered in the face of overwhelming evidence against her. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," Susan admitted tearfully during a court-mandated mediation session. "I was scared, Rick. I didn't know what else to do." Her words held a bitter irony, a stark contrast to the remorseless defiance she had displayed earlier in our divorce proceedings. But the damage had been done, irreparably altering the course of our marriage and our lives. The courtroom became a battleground of legal arguments and emotional testimony. Witnesses testified to Susan's financial misconduct, presenting a compelling case that underscored the extent of her deception. "You can't hide from the truth, Susan," Mr. Davis argued passionately during cross-examination. "Your actions have consequences, and it's time to be held accountable." Susan's defense faltered under the weight of evidence and scrutiny. Her attempts to deflect blame and minimize her role in the breakdown of our marriage rang hollow in the face of overwhelming proof. As the proceedings drew to a close, I found myself grappling with a mix of emotions: relief at the exposure of Susan's deceit, sadness for the loss of the life we had once shared, and a lingering sense of betrayal that would take time to heal. But amidst the legal battles and emotional turmoil, a quiet sense of closure began to settle within me. The courtroom had become the crucible where truth and justice prevailed, where Susan's deception had been laid bare for all to see. As I prepared to move forward with my life, I clung to the hope that someday I would find peace and healing amidst the wreckage of Susan's betrayal. The road ahead would be challenging, marked by the scars of a fractured marriage and the lessons learned from its painful unraveling. But through it all, I remained steadfast in my determination to reclaim my integrity, my assets, and my future from the tumultuous aftermath of Susan's betrayal. The final stages of the divorce proceedings culminated in a dramatic courtroom showdown, a culmination of months of legal battles, emotional turmoil, and personal upheaval. As I entered the courtroom on the day of the final hearing, a mix of anticipation and apprehension filled the air. Susan sat opposite me, her demeanor a stark contrast to the confident facade she had once projected. The judge presided over the proceedings with a solemnity that underscored the gravity of the situation. Witnesses were called, evidence was presented, and arguments were exchanged with an intensity that mirrored the emotional weight of our fractured marriage. Mr. Davis, my lawyer, presented a compelling case based on the evidence of Susan's infidelity and financial misconduct. He argued passionately for a fair and equitable division of assets, emphasizing the impact of Susan's actions on our marriage and my financial stability. "We seek a resolution that reflects Mr. Johnson's contributions and sacrifices over the course of their 40-year marriage," Mr. Davis asserted, his voice resonant with conviction. Susan's lawyer countered with objections and arguments aimed at mitigating the consequences of her actions. He attempted to paint Susan as a victim of circumstances, appealing to the judge's empathy and understanding. "It was a moment of weakness," Susan's lawyer argued during his closing statement. "Susan regrets her actions deeply and wishes for an amicable resolution." But the courtroom was a battlefield where truth and accountability prevailed over emotional appeals and legal maneuvering. Witnesses testified to Susan's infidelity and financial deception, presenting a compelling case that underscored the irreparable damage to our marriage. "You made choices, Susan," Mr. Davis countered, his voice unwavering, "and now you must face the consequences." The judge listened attentively to both sides, weighing the evidence and arguments presented before rendering a decision that would determine the finality of our divorce and the division of our assets. "The court finds in favor of Mr. Johnson," the judge announced solemnly, his voice echoing through the courtroom. "Based on the evidence presented, including financial misconduct and infidelity, the division of assets will proceed as outlined in Mr. Johnson's petition." Susan's face paled, shock and disbelief flickering across her features. The reality of the judge's decision sank in with painful clarity, marking the end of our marriage and the resolution of our legal battles. As the courtroom emptied and the finality of the judge's decision settled over us, I felt a mix of emotions: relief at the closure of this tumultuous chapter, sadness for the end of a partnership that had once been filled with love and hope, and a sense of empowerment in reclaiming my life from the wreckage of Susan's betrayal. But amidst the emotional aftermath and legal resolution, a quiet sense of peace began to settle within me. The final showdown in the courtroom had brought clarity and closure, paving the way for healing and new beginnings. Leaving the courthouse that day, I carried with me a renewed sense of hope for the future, a future free from the shadows of Susan's betrayal, where I could rebuild my life with integrity, resilience, and a newfound appreciation for the journey ahead. Victory in the courtroom brought a bittersweet sense of closure, a resolution to the legal battles that had consumed my life since discovering Susan's betrayal. As I navigated the aftermath of our divorce, I grappled with a mix of emotions: relief at the finality of our separation, sadness for the end of a chapter in my life, and a lingering sense of triumph in reclaiming my integrity and financial security. The division of assets proceeded as outlined in the judge's decision, marking the culmination of months of financial maneuvering and legal negotiations. With the guidance of Mr. Davis, I ensured that my interests were protected and that Susan's attempts to contest the terms of our divorce were effectively countered. "Congratulations, Rick," Mr. Davis remarked with a hint of satisfaction during our final meeting. "You've navigated this process with dignity and resolve. Now it's time to focus on moving forward." His words resonated with me, a reminder of the strength and resilience I had demonstrated throughout the ordeal. The victory in court was not just a legal triumph, but a personal vindication, a testament to my determination to reclaim my life from the turmoil of Susan's betrayal. Yet, amidst the sense of victory, I faced the daunting task of rebuilding my life. The emotional scars of our fractured marriage lingered, a reminder of the trust that had been shattered and the dreams that had been left unfulfilled. "I never thought it would come to this," Susan admitted quietly during a final meeting to settle remaining financial matters. Her voice carried a mixture of regret and resignation, a stark contrast to the defiance she had once displayed. "I'm sorry, Susan," I replied softly, my voice tinged with sadness. "But this is the consequence of your choices." She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "I know," she whispered, her gaze fixed on the floor. The meeting was brief, yet poignant, a symbolic end to our shared history and a tentative step toward separate futures. As Susan gathered her belongings and prepared to leave, I felt a pang of sympathy for the woman who had once been my partner and confidant. "Take care of yourself, Susan," I said quietly as she walked toward the door. She paused, her hand on the doorknob, before turning to face me. "You too, Rick," she replied with a faint smile that held a trace of sadness. And with that, she was gone, a figure from my past, now relegated to memories of a life that had once held so much promise. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life with renewed determination. I reconnected with friends and family who had stood by me throughout the ordeal, finding solace in their support and understanding. "I'm proud of you, son," my father remarked during a quiet moment together. "You've shown strength and courage in the face of adversity." His words brought a sense of validation, a reaffirmation of the choices I had made to prioritize my own well-being and integrity. The victory in court had not just been about financial settlement, but about reclaiming my identity and forging a path toward healing. As I settled into a new routine, I reflected on the lessons learned from the tumultuous journey of divorce. Trust once broken was not easily mended, and the scars of Susan's betrayal would remain with me for a lifetime. But amidst the wreckage of our fractured marriage, I found moments of peace and clarity. I embraced the opportunity to rediscover myself, to pursue passions and interests that had been overshadowed by the demands of married life. "I'm proud of you too, Dad," my daughter Sarah remarked during a visit one weekend. "You've been through so much and you're still standing strong." Her words filled me with pride, a reminder of the resilience that had carried me through the darkest moments of divorce. Sarah's unwavering support and love were a beacon of hope as I embarked on a new chapter of my life. The road ahead would not be without challenges, but I faced the future with renewed optimism and determination. Victory in the courtroom had brought closure to one chapter of my life, paving the way for new beginnings and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. And as I looked toward the horizon, I knew that despite the pain and heartache of Susan's betrayal, I had emerged stronger and wiser. The journey of divorce had tested my resilience, but it had also reaffirmed my belief in the power of perseverance and the enduring strength of the human spirit. With the legal battles behind me and the dust settling from the tumultuous journey of divorce, I embraced the task of rebuilding my life with renewed determination and a sense of purpose. Reconnecting with friends and family became a cornerstone of my healing process. Their unwavering support and understanding provided a comforting anchor as I navigated the emotional aftermath of Susan's betrayal. "I'm glad to see you smiling again," my friend Mike remarked during a weekend barbecue. "You've been through hell, but you're coming out stronger." His words echoed the sentiments of those who had stood by me throughout the ordeal. Their encouragement became a source of strength as I embarked on a journey of self-discovery and personal growth. I immersed myself in activities that brought me joy and fulfillment, taking up photography, exploring new hiking trails, and volunteering at a local community center. Each new experience brought a sense of liberation, a reminder that life held endless possibilities beyond the confines of a fractured marriage. "I didn't realize how much I missed this," I admitted to Sarah one afternoon as we hiked along a scenic trail near our town. She smiled warmly, her eyes reflecting pride and admiration. "You're doing great, Dad," she replied. "You're finding yourself again." Her words filled me with gratitude, a reminder of the resilience that had carried me through the darkest moments of divorce. Sarah's unwavering support and love continued to be a guiding light as I embraced the journey of self-renewal. Reflecting on the lessons learned from the tumultuous journey, I found a newfound sense of clarity and perspective. Trust once broken was not easily mended, and the scars of Susan's betrayal would remain with me for a lifetime. Yet, amidst the wreckage of our fractured marriage, I discovered an inner strength and resilience that had been tested but not broken. "I've come a long way," I mused during a quiet moment of reflection at a local cafe, savoring the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. The journey of divorce had been a catalyst for personal growth and transformation. It had taught me valuable lessons about love, trust, and the importance of staying true to oneself in the face of adversity. As I looked toward the future, I felt a renewed sense of optimism and hope. The road ahead would not be without challenges, but I faced it with a newfound confidence in my ability to overcome obstacles and embrace new beginnings. And so, as the sun set on one chapter of my life, I embraced the promise of tomorrow, a future filled with possibilities, renewed purpose, and the enduring belief that, despite the pain of Susan's betrayal, I had emerged stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace whatever life had in store. This is the story of how I navigated the tumultuous journey of divorce, found healing amidst the wreckage of betrayal, and emerged stronger and more resilient than ever before.